What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly podcast for movies that have been rebooted, remade, sequelized, adapted, and are otherwise unoriginal and uninspired, and whether or not we need to do this again and again and again and again. I'm your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is my co-host, Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And this week we are talking about the movie that I keep forgetting is technically the third in a franchise because it's so disconnected.
Yeah.
But it also isn't.
Correct.
But one of these movies today, released 24 years ago, it is in fact the 24th anniversary of Jumanji.
Yeah.
So we are talking about Jumanji 3, a sentence I never thought I would say.
Ever.
The Next Level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starring Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Karen Gillan.
And Kevin Hart.
And him.
It does seem to be a big thing where people forget, I'm going to go see Jumanji 2, and my brain keeps saying, like, I'm not going to correct you because you're technically not wrong. It is a sequel to that one, but this is the third one.
Well, it's very odd because when we originally heard we were getting Jumanji, whatever the subtitle for that one was...
Welcome to the Jungle.
Welcome to the Jungle.
Yes.
I think we all collectively went... But why?
We don't need to do this.
To which we discovered, because it's quite fun.
This is a joy.
We figured out an inventive way to bring back a fun movie that is a engaging story and premise and very smart and breathed new life into it. But they've been very clever about not having numbers.
Yeah.
They're going with
Subtitles.
Grand Theft Auto rules and every video game rule because numbers just stop mattering
after a while. Yeah. They get in the way. I mean, I think the Fast and Furious franchise stopped that at 4 or 5. They're like, you never mind.
No, 3.
That's right. Too Fast.
Tokyo Drift. Too Furious.
Never mind.
Yeah. Then the third one, they were like, we're not going to make these forever. Just call it Tokyo Drift. And now we have spin-offs, and we're going to go to space.
Right.
Because all of you are idiots who go see movies.
Keep seeing these.
It's your fault, listeners.
Yeah. But I think the Jumanji 2 thing is also a lot of people forget because it's more, which we kind of want when we do remakes or sequels, but it's more of a spiritual sequel than it is like a 1-to-1 ratio. Like they don't do the board game. Like Zathura is more of a sequel to Jumanji.
Zathura is the spiritual sequel. That's the System Shock to BioShock, where the rules are the same, but we just went to space.
Right.
I think Jumanji they could have very easily just made it Jumanji and forgot about the Robin Williams movie, and I think having it exist in the canon,
in the world,
it also gives a very weird mystery to what is this game and why does this exist.
Right.
And, back in that first one, we just rewatched the very original Jumanji, and it's like a thumping noise that you hear, and I kept just wondering, like, are all these construction workers just furious? Like, what? It washes up on a beach. I mean, you could have really...
Yeah.
And you never want to do this. I feel like one day they're going to be like, let's make Jumanji 0 and get into this curse or whatever it is, and we don't ever need to do that.
We don't ever need to do that. I think some things are just better like, we won't explain. It just happens, and I'm okay with that.
I miss the 90s when movies were just like magic.
It is.
Remember Liar Liar when a boy made a wish and we just ran with that?
Like, cool.
Like,
got it.
I really kind of just miss when it was like she hit her head and now she's in a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
Who cares?
This mannequin keeps becoming alive when people aren't looking at it. Fine. All right, I'm in.
I feel like that's a really weird thing we've come to, and like the 2010s will be defined by over-explaining a narrative instead of just sort of giving us a fun set piece and being like,
run with it.
You're in or you're out.
Yeah.
It's Jumanji. It's for children. They don't care.
Exactly. Yeah.
They never wondered where the Cat in the Hat came from.
No.
Turns out it's a nightmare disaster when it's in live action. So Jumanji: The Next Level. Thoughts?
So I was a huge fan of Welcome to the Jungle, Jumanji. That was a movie I saw 3 times in the theater, and
That's
it was
a lot.
It's a lot, and it's one of those ones where people, like, if people were coming into town, and I would be like, they were like, "Oh, what's a good movie to see?" And I knew that they weren't Star Wars fans. I would be like, "Well, this is hilarious. You want to go see this?" And I haven't seen that yet. Cool, let's go see it. And I would go watch it with them. And so I loved that movie. And so my expectations for this one were a little high because I was such a big fan of that. And I won't say that this movie was a letdown, but it was definitely a step right under where I was with the last one. Like, I loved Welcome to the Jungle. I liked The Next Level. There are just some things that just didn't quite... I won't say the magic was gone, but there's some things that just didn't quite connect. all the way through to make this as enjoyable of a ride as the last one was.
Well, it's hitting a lot of the familiar beats.
Yeah.
And I want to be like, yes, I had a lot of fun in this movie.
Right.
But I think once it was over and I kind of was wore off by the CGI roller coaster
Yes.
I was on.
It's a fun ride. Yeah,
that
it's a lot.
I started really dissecting it, and my first kind of big issue is the beginning's pacing. It took a long time to get to Jumanji.
20 minutes before we get into the Jumanji world.
And it was a very clunky intro to tell us very generic things.
Very generic things. And it is a clunky way to do it. I feel like there should have been more of a streamline. But you're essentially telling, because you're introducing the Danny DeVito and Glover's characters, but you're telling two stories and trying to merge them and do it as quickly as possible to get them into this world. But it just feels like it's very, because you have 4 characters who are not together also, so you have to explain each of them, why they come together, and then you have these other 2. I was like, this is a lot. You have 6 characters that you have to put into one spot at the same time, and you're taking 20 minutes of what's supposed to be an adventure fun ride. For this to be a fantasy fun kid film, you start this movie off very slowly to get kids' attention, because for 25 minutes, if I were a child, I'd be like, I am out.
Well, and then and I get that it's a sequel, and we have to assume some people didn't see
correct.
Jumanji 2.
Yeah. Welcome.
I'm just going to do that the whole time.
Yeah.
That we have to redo a lot of the exposition
Right.
that was in the first movie, a lot of the rules, and where in the first movie everybody kind of accepted it quickly. You had a gamer character who was able to just go, I'm in a video
explain the
game,
world to you.
I can accept this and run. In this one, you have the character switch that Danny DeVito is The Rock now, and Kevin Hart is Danny Glover, and it takes them so long to understand and accept where they are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that got
it's repetitive.
very old, because I
repetitive.
kept having to hear not only the exposition, but then the joke of it being like, huh? And then we have to say it again, which I was like, he's become The Rock.
Yeah.
If his legs and everything else is better, his hearing should be better too.
Right.
And his level of comprehension should be fine.
I think I feel like we all know, for you and I know, and I feel like everybody should know, for comedy there's a rule of 3. Like if you do a triplet, it's 1, 2, 3 should be your payoff. They overuse that I'm old and I can't hear things way beyond that. I was like, oh, this is no longer funny. You're now just beating a dead horse.
Well, I didn't even really like The Rock that much in this movie.
No, it's a weird thing. Both The Rock and Kevin Hart are playing very different than what they did before. And Danny DeVito, it's fun in bits, but I don't think Rock's not as good of an actor to do this as opposed to doing the Spencer version of that character. I think he fit into that much more. And Kevin Hart does his a lot better with Glover. I just think because Kevin Hart's specialty is doing the high-pitched, fast-talking way of delivering comedy, that when you slow him down and make him go baritone, you kind of lose that. And so the connection between the two of them was a little bit off. Luckily, Karen and Jack were having a blast, and they were carrying the film for the first half of this movie until we get the spoilers, the switch, when everybody kind of goes back to the original. Once that happens, I'm in. Once Rock's back to being Spencer Rock, I'm like, oh, this is what I wanted. This is where but the problem is, if they did that the whole movie, then I would be complaining about, oh, you just gave me the same film over and over again. And so I don't mind them attempting it. I just think the execution on it was wrong, and it went on a little too long.
It's what I call the Shazam effect now, where you have Zach Levi and Shazam playing a 6-year-old, but he's not playing the 6-year-old that we got.
Right.
And I felt like Danny DeVito, The Rock, and then the spoiler, who also inhabits Danny DeVito for a while, isn't playing the Danny DeVito we see in the first act of this movie. They're playing the
heightened
pop
caricature
culture version of Danny DeVito that we all have.
Right.
It's like a little bit of Frank Reynolds and a little bit of the Penguin and a little bit of him from Jumanji and a little bit of Twins. And it's where the body swap movie gets very challenging. And you think of something like Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis. Mm-hmm. And they both do a really good job in that movie of playing each other.
Yeah.
Even things like The Watchmen that recently we got, where you really are seeing an actor inhibit somebody else's role and playing that instead, where I think in the first Jumanji, the characters they paired up with had better renditions of it. And I think part of it was that the comedy of that movie was also where they all landed. So now you don't really get this hero worship of the skinny loser kid gets to be The Rock, and the giant football player becomes the small tiny Kevin Hart, and the girl becomes Jack Black. And
the other girl who's an awkward N-word becomes this badass Ruby Roundhouse.
Right. But I also think that's my second problem with the movie is the character arcs I just don't think are as strong.
They're not. I think, they played a lot better in the first one. And actually, the character arcs that work here, unfortunately, when they get resolved, go to two characters that we don't know. Like we got Awkwafina doing one of them, which she's fine in it and she's great in it. And then a horse.
Yeah, and even that arc, like the first movie's arc really was more accepting who you are and accepting other people and like the growing up of childhood and dealing with, well, you got cool and I didn't, and well, that's in your head and da-da-da-da-da-da. And this one was a grudge that we kind of got three scenes.
Right, we're getting thrown into. Like, we don't know this. And it bothered me. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm pretty good at guessing, and I'm pretty good at like following stories along, but I knew something was up because when he mentioned that they were going to stay at Nora's, Danny DeVito's character reacted. But we didn't know until about 50% of the way into the movie that used to be their old restaurant. I'm like, guys, this either we should have known this from jump, or we need to do this in a cleaner way where the people who are telling us this are the actual people, not that at that point it was The Rock and Kevin Hart. And I was like, okay, this isn't working. The way you're explaining the problems that they're having in real world are not working the way that you think they might be when you're having them do it in Jumanji world. Now, granted, I think I talked to you about this last night when we spoke about this film, is that the Kevin Hart and The Rock's, the moments that they have their delivery of what's going on in the world actually don't affect what they're doing in Jumanji world. Like, they're doing them in times when they are actually just walking or not under pressure. There's moments when Spencer and I think it's M, as they call her now in college, but when she's Ruby and when they're The Rock and they're on the ice, they actually have a mission to complete, and they just stop in the middle of their thing to give us exposition. I was like, guys, you're not doing this as smoothly as you were last time.
Yeah, whenever they decide to do the important character moments are really moments where it all should have been resolved 20 minutes ago, and then we just go to this.
Right.
Like, they all needed to hash this. And you have so many characters on the board now dealing with so many arcs that it all just gets a little messy. Mm-hmm. And I think as a result, some of them just kind of get thrown out. Like Jack Black, who steals the movie, becomes phenomenal. The over-the-top. And he has the same comedy from the first one of just, why am I this body?
Right.
And that really works out because you kind of get like the exposition again, but from a point of view of somebody who now can also tell you that you're bad at it.
Right.
That you've chosen characters
are not doing the correct thing that your job's supposed to be doing. Yeah, like I think he's the best out of all of the ones that have returned. And Karen's doing great too. She's basically playing the
fine.
same part, yeah.
I don't like it when she's playing Fridge. I was so happy they got out of that quickly.
You know what? I was so happy that they got out of that too quickly because it twofolds. One, it kind of made me uncomfortable because I was sitting there like, as a black male, I was like, okay, wait. I don't know that much about Fridge, but I don't know if Fridge just acts this way or if they're saying that this is how black people act.
Don't spend really enough time with him to know if this is who he is, or if Jack Black and Karen Gillan are like, I'm playing a black man.
Right. And I was like, this is real close to pissing me off, guys.
Yeah, it's not quite problematic, and I've seen nothing on like quote unquote film Twitter
it doesn't
about
upset me, right?
Because I don't think anyone's mad,
right.
But I think if you really get under that hood, everyone's like, well,
wait a minute. Yeah. And so you're right. That whole sequence, it's funny. That whole sequence I did not like. And I was like, why is this in here? But then when we get the payoff of why, I was like, oh, they needed to know this, so it has had to happen. And I'm glad that they quickly went back and got out of it. Yeah.
In and out. Because at first I thought we were going to stay in that, and I just
I do not want
to do that. No. I was like, oh man, now everyone's going to switch, and but then it just, that moment it's great, and then we're in it.
Yeah.
I get it. It's like a video game, and the villain doesn't matter, and it's a MacGuffin. I'm starting to get a little like, okay, we can get a non-paper thin,
a super thin antagonist, yeah, and it's
because this one was the story arcs for the characters and like the interpersonal conflict was so much weaker.
Right.
I really focused more on
I noticed
that
the
villain.
Yeah, I think the last time everything else was so much stronger that Bobby Cannavale's villain could be whatever. The story was so strong that I'm like, that's fine. Something has to suffer here. But this one, the story is a lot weaker. And
it is another like go get a stone and say Jumanji.
So the premise is the same once you're in the game. So it's like, oh, none of this has gone up another level, which quote unquote is the name of the movie. For me to kind of like, oh, we don't really need to come back here on 100%.
Did you want an explanation as to why the game was different this time?
I did. It bothered me. Only as a gamer, if the Jumanji system that they had was either online or even like a disc or CD, I might be willing to take it, but it's a cartridge. So if you break a cartridge and then try to put it back together, the game should essentially be the same or be out of whack using the same beats and same stuff that happens in it.
To me, it's one line. Just have the guy be like, welcome back to Jumanji. You completed the first challenge and you have unlocked this.
DLC,
and I was like,
right.
Great.
Yeah, like, cool, I'm in it.
I beat Legend of Zelda back in the 80s, and when I reloaded it and it was harder, I accepted that.
Yeah, and so...
Super Mario re-ups it with Beetles instead of Koopas.
It's one of those things that bothers me, but then based on what we said at the beginning, I kind of just like, all right, I'll treat this as one of those 90 movies. If you're telling me it's just different when we go in there, fine. I guess that's... But the problem is, they had me doing that on so many different things in this movie where I'm like, all right, I can't keep putting this stuff.
They really kind of just assume you're going to accept all of it.
Right.
Because we did last time.
Yeah.
I do kind of wish we had some like newer jokes. It was a lot of like the greatest hits. There was enough with Kevin Hart and Jack Black that I kind of was like, okay, there's enough like fun new stuff.
Yeah,
but even within the movie itself, we had the giant ostrich scene, which I loved.
That was great.
But then we did a giant monkey scene, and
which
part of me was
felt like overkill. Like, I was like, what? I'm so stimulated. Like, there's so much happening.
And I got excited because I'm a big video game person. Yeah. And they have all those platforms, and I was like, oh, here it comes. We're going to get some, like, crazy Donkey Kong Country.
Right.
This guy knows geometry for a reason, and everyone's going to be on platforms. Mm-hmm. And we don't even need monsters for this part. Or just two.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of hit me, that I was like, if we're going to do a video game, I want there to be a boss in every
some
level.
Type of video game structure where like you have to solve a puzzle, you have to complete something to get this. And this movie, unlike the last one, because I think the last one did a much better job of getting the video game aspect right. Like you have to finish this part before you move on to the next level. Like they had to do the snake thing.
Yeah.
And they move on to the next level. This one does not do that at all.
Yeah, give me some like Uncharted puzzles.
Yeah.
Give me like a boss fight. Like we jumped over Bowser 8 times in the Super Mario Brothers.
Right.
You can give me something. Like,
yeah, it loses the video game aspect of it, and then stuff just starts happening. Like we get Nick Jonas just shows up all of a sudden. You're like, all right, cool. I guess I could see that character be back. And then there's a horse, and I'm like, okay, now these are characters that we have no type of attachment to. I was trying to remember
because I saw Jumanji 1 and I didn't watch Welcome to the Jungle again, but I remember in that movie when they select their characters, the pilot is already taken.
Yes.
Then they get their 4.
That was Nick Jonas.
And there's two other ones that they could have chosen. Or one other one.
I think there's one other one.
So that would have that could be your stealth assassin person. I'll tell you what bothered me. That's another like video game nitpick that I thought about when the monkey showed up. No Archer on the team.
Yeah, there's nobody with like weapon, like
no
too big to use
projectiles.
a projectile weapon, right?
Yeah, you're all and that was even where I was like, okay, the strengths and weaknesses are fun, but like let's really think about
you would balance out a team
how you would do it right. Like if this was a real video game, it would be we'd all be like, well, everyone's a brawler. This is stupid.
Right.
Why would you pick Jack Black?
Yeah,
like you really have to start being like, what?
Yeah,
you would only want to be The Rock. One of these characters just holds items for you.
Yeah, it's like you got one person who's literally just a weapon cache, and that's it.
Go into the MMO. I want my white mage. I want my healer. I want my black mage. I want my guy who just throws a blitz ball. I want the sword guy, the strong guy. I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
And it just isn't that well thought out.
It's not.
And it's fine because it's fun. But I really am like, if we're going to keep doing this.
Yeah. There were definitely moments, like we were saying, how I was sitting there like, oh, if I had not seen if you're expecting people to go into this movie not having had seen Welcome to the Jungle, you do jokes in here actively that you had to have seen Welcome to the Jungle, or the jokes here don't land as well. Like bringing out the entire radio thing for her to fight is great because I know in the first one that's what her setup was when Ruby Roundhouse starts fighting. You need that Baby I Love Your Way song. But if you're just watching that in this movie, you're like,
but then we just throw nunchucks at her as her new thing.
And she doesn't even really use it. She sees nunchucks, gets excited about it, says it, and then uses it, and then that's it.
And you're done.
They're gone.
I was like, well, that's not
yeah.
as fun as...
No.
And it's funny because I feel like this falls into the same pratfalls that a lot of comedy sequels do, where it's Anchorman 2, Austin Powers 3, even Austin Powers 2, all kind of start repeating themselves. Yeah. Even something like 22 Jump Street kind of starts...
greatest hits of what, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of a shame because it's tough to build on, and I think this happens more to comedy sequels than traditional ones because it's so much safer to get the big laugh of like, oh, and it's fine to do one or two.
Right.
But I feel like so many of these movies, like... I don't know, give me a Gremlins 2 type thing where
you just go for broke,
left.
just completely scrap everything you thought and go to, like, we're going to go a completely different way.
It would have been kind of fun if they had gone into Jumanji and because it was broken, it was like an 8-bit game.
I would have loved that.
They should have had less.
Right.
The game should have been broken and it should have been like 2D sometimes or like really play with that idea.
Yeah.
That would have been really cool.
I also think, I don't know if we should have at some point, like I was thinking today, I was like, what could have made this a better entry for me? And a part of me was like, well, maybe we should have just started the movie already in the video game and we kind of start trying to figure out which character, like who is that
I didn't need to see Spencer in CVS working a shitty part-time job to get that he wanted to go be The Rock again.
Exactly.
Because he's been The Rock.
Right.
Like, obviously he's going to come back
who
from college.
Who doesn't want to be like, shit, I need to do that again.
Right. Remember Cypher in The Matrix when he was like, fuck all this noise, and then wanted to go back?
I get it. Yeah. You don't need to explain that to me.
I don't need 30 minutes of like, and then she went off. And then we did the most stereotypical, generic, like, well, you went to college and your Instagram looked fun and
yeah, it's
and
one
she's
of those
like, well,
ones.
you dumped me. And I was like, this could have been so much. What are we doing?
That's one of those ones where as an adult, that makes me roll my eyes, and I'm sitting there like, this. If you're making the first one, if you're making it for all families, then that cleanup to get them back together and why they haven't spoken needs to be a little bit bigger than that. Because right now you're writing this as a teenage romance angst film, and I'm like, no, that's not going to cut it. Like that's just BS.
I mean, look, I get it. You start the first movie with a kid who doesn't know who he is, and he gets to be The Rock.
Right.
So you start the second movie with now life just hasn't gone his way, and he wants to relive the glory days.
Right.
He's the kid who peaked in high school now.
Right.
I buy that as a narrative
Especially
device.
Going from high school to college, I get it. Or going from high school, high school to real life. If you didn't go to school, you're like, I get it. You were the king of the castle, and now you're back at.
And I think there's a lot to do with that now because we do live in this like social media age where I can go on the internet and see what everybody else is doing. And if my life doesn't match theirs, I get like, no, why isn't it this way?
And that tracks. Out of the four of them, he probably would be the one with the hardest because Fridge looks like a tank, like he's a large black dude who plays sports, and the other two are women, and they are attracted. They're pretty girls.
But he's
so
also
like,
going to NYU, so a part of me is
like,
life ain't
shut
that
up, right?
bad, buddy. Like,
yeah, you'll be okay, sir.
Turns out the cute redhead you like didn't even want to break up with you.
No.
You actually have no problem.
Nothing is wrong with you.
Oh, no, my giant Hulk of a friend is out. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I get it. Freshman year of college is tough, but you know what? We don't explore that at all.
Right.
We don't build up these characters.
No.
We throw two old people, but I liked the end where Danny DeVito was like, getting old is great, and it's a blessing. And I was like, we could have really told...
I feel like they could have leaned into that more, because outside of when he says it at the very beginning, we don't really come back to that until that very final
all you have to
statement.
do is like structure the movie where they kind of mirror each other, and he's very much like, well, if getting old sucks, I might as well just stay in Jumanji, and then have Danny DeVito be like, no, like this isn't real, and neither is all this social media nonsense.
Exactly.
Like, this is what life really is.
Right. Yeah, you almost need to make the reason why Spencer goes in to just be like, I want to stay here. Like, this world's better. Like, make it like Ready Player One, where like, I don't want to leave here. Like, this world is much better than my real world. And that gives more stakes to why he choked. Because right now, it just seems like he went in there and is like, I'm bored, and I don't. Nobody likes me. Well,
and I think that's how you make it a little bit more relevant to 2019.
Right.
Is you really, because I think we do live in that era now of like people get addicted to even like their fandoms, and they just live in this social media world, and they don't want to go out.
Right.
And we all like, you're seeing more and more people who are hitting 30 being like, oh, I'm 30 and I've peaked. And it's like, well, there is kind of something thematically to like, no, you're still going to grow up. There's more here. We don't need to be like latched into nostalgia and the past and what was and get wrapped up in what other people are posting. But instead of doing that, we have The Rock go, for 2.5 hours.
The false smoldering stuff did not work for me at all. Like
that's also, that joke stops working when you're out of the women to react to it.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. No, that's very true. Yeah, it's a weird like a lot of the bits for me that The Rock, and I thought he was one of the best parts of the first one, he just did not work in this movie.
No, and I had a good time and I laughed. But you know what the best way to describe it is? I bought the Jumanji Blu-ray because I like that movie and it's very good. I probably will not see this one again, but if people ask me to go, I'd be like, go, it's a good time.
It's like, I was like, I wouldn't tell
anybody. Is bad.
Right, I wouldn't tell anybody not to see this, but unlike last time when I was like, oh, that movie is great, you need to see it, and I'm like, oh, it's fine.
Are you interested? I was going to say, should we do the spoiler button and talk about what we want to see from
I'm
the fourth?
More curious. That's right. Technically not the third. I am more interested in what is to come after this because there's a button at the end of this film where, if any New Girl fans, we get a surprise from Winston, who is the heat repairman, and he goes downstairs, plays with the little systems. Like, oh, I love games. Pushes it, and then all of a sudden we hear the construction
Loves
sound.
video games. Doesn't mention that this system does not exist.
It's not a real thing.
Like, you would think that he would be like, that's not an Atari or a Nintendo or a PlayStation. I don't know this machine. Like if I was a huge gamer and there was like, you remember when for a minute Sony and Nintendo were going to make a system together, and recently somebody like found that prototype and was like, I found, here it is.
Right.
It's got Nintendo on the PlayStation 1 controller and we all lost our minds because it was worth like, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
If you wandered down and you were a big gamer and somebody had a mystery machine, you wouldn't just be like, I love video games.
Right.
Let me push the button. You'd be like, hold up.
Hold on. I don't know this. Where did
it's
this
like
come
that
from?
Simpsons episode where they have the Casablanca alternative ending and everyone's like, why do you have this? We all react earnestly to it.
Yeah. But he pushes it and then we hear the famous drums that signal Jumanji's coming.
Everyone's got tinnitus in that town.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, it's back.
What is going on?
And a little too much whiskey. It clogs the Eustachian tubes, you know?
Yeah, and then you see the ostriches going down a regular side street, which is fascinating to me.
So it posits a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And my first overthinking brain goes, does the original town of Jumanji remember Jumanji?
Right. I was like, is this a magical world where they've ignored that?
Nora is also from the first
Right.
Jumanji.
Right.
We find out that the people who bought Danny DeVito's, I almost said bar, restaurant is Nora from Robin Williams' Jumanji.
Right.
So is she going to now, in this next movie, have to be like, oh, 24 years ago to the day of recording this episode, Jumanji happened?
Yeah.
Because you'd think that if, giant poisonous bees showed up in a suburb.
Pretty freaky, yeah.
What do you want to see from that? Because we got to bring back The Rock. And
you have to
right?
You have to bring the A-listers. So The Rock, Karen, Kevin, and Jack Black. Even though Jack says he's retiring, they all need to come back in some form. He's not retiring.
He just wants to make another Tenacious D album. Then he'll be back.
Then he'll be back. He'll be fine. What I would love is if those four came back into this world as the super character, like whoever, like Bravestone.
The versions they
would be had there nobody been playing them.
Yeah.
Like if they were in the game, how would they be? So Rock's going to be this super suave macho, like I'm Dr. Bravestone, and Karen's this badass, like I can do nothing wrong, and Jack Black.
And then we'll finally see Jack Black.
Right,
we don't know that.
Right, we don't know what his character would be, so you'll finally get the true version. And I want them to have to pair with, or not even pair with the exact person they had, because they've switched a couple of times, but pair with one of the original kids, kind of like, especially Spencer, because
get some hero worship.
I always wanted to be you, and then you see him and you're like, you're kind of.
Well, that's really what they would have to do to make his arc work.
Right.
You'd have to leave the fourth movie and really be like, oh, this is who I am, and it's fine with my great education and my hot girlfriend.
Very pretty girl here. I am great.
Oh, it's all good. Thanks, Jumanji.
Well done. And that's what I would like to see, and I think also your stakes should be a lot higher because they can really die in the real world.
Right. So you're done with the lives.
Right. Yeah. So the lives thing kind of.
I guess you would give probably the video game avatars
They
would have three in the real world,
right.
maybe.
Probably, yeah.
And then your like third act twist would be The Rock being like, "I'm staying here," and you'd get some last action hero shit, and they'd have to kill him.
Like,
Terrence, I love it.
It would be fantastic.
He's got one life left at the end. Everything is
everybody
gone,
has
and
to
he's like,
take-
"This is my world." Oh yeah,
I want that.
Why aren't we doing? Let's call Sony.
Yes.
That would be great.
Because I think you need to flip it on its head. And it obviously would have to have, I keep calling him Winston, but New Girl, he has to be around.
Well, yeah, you don't get that actor to just
That's too big of
be
a
goofy
right.
for 30 seconds.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you get him to pair up with the real Aquafina.
That's right. That's right.
I think that would be great. The movie obviously is doing well. People want this. 60 million.
60 million. It's got it's lower critically on the Rotten
because
Tomatoes.
it's not as
good. But the fans still seem to enjoy it. But yeah, the critic score is pretty much indicative of how I feel. I think the last one was in the 80s to 90s. This one's in the 60s. That's about correct.
Yeah,
That's
I
about
feel
right.
weird whenever I kind of shit on something the entire time, but then I'm like, no, it's funny, and I had a good time.
Right.
It is funny. I did have a good time.
But I can.
When you're going to sit me down at a microphone for 40 minutes, I'm going to start picking at it.
It's a weird thing. I think had Welcome to the Jungle not existed, I probably would have appreciated this film more.
See, I think I would have been like, why are we doing this?
Got it.
If we didn't have Welcome to the Jungle, I would have been like, what are we doing here?
You need the really good one to be like, okay, I guess we can go back to
right, because I'll allow you a dip here.
Right.
I will allow you a small decline.
Yeah.
For greatness when we all fight The Rock.
It would be amazing.
I hope that's what happens now.
I do too. I didn't want that now.
Yeah, I'm like, this would be great.
Yeah.
He's never really been a villain in anything.
And I have
either.
a feeling the Black Adam might be the closest
never
he gets
come
to that.
out.
Right. This movie will never happen. But I think that's the closest that you would get to that. And I hope he does they're going to make that such a hero thing instead of a villain.
Well, of course.
But I think that would be the closest you get to ever seeing him as a villain. And I would because I think he's charismatic enough that if you made him a villain, you'd be like, oh my God.
Well, I think I'm just ready to see him do some stuff besides be The Rock.
Right.
I'm ready for the wow.
Yeah.
But who knows? The Shadow knows. And that's our show, guys. Give us a review on iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/HollywoodADI and Twitter at HollywoodADI. And we will see you guys next week.
Later.